All right, explain like I'm five. Something that I think is kind of a problem with human in the loop workflows is that a lot of the tooling that's out there is really not appropriate for human in the loop. We're looking at visual code, which is one of the most common IDEs out there. This experience is clearly meant for the coding experience, the heart and soul of the Visual Studio. The Visual Code UI is on the left, there's a file explorer, and on the right, there's an editor. That user paradigm has dominated the IDE industry and most developer tooling for as long as I've been in the game. It's always a file explorer on the left and an editor on the right. And the text editor is the visual focus of the engineer. Well, that does make a lot of sense if the engineer is the person writing the code. But what if I'm not writing code? What if my role in this process is to supervise LLM output? Well, then this IDE experience sucks. This is a terrible experience because so much of the screen real estate is irrelevant to my actual job. Recall, as an LLM supervisor, I'm not trying to write code. I'm trying to efficiently supervise LLMs and to efficiently assess LLM output. So I don't know what's going to happen with this, but the IDEs that I'm accustomed to, that would be the JetBrains product suite, Visual Code. I used Eclipse back in the day, even as far back as Visual Age. They're fine, they're cool, but they're tools that were appropriate for the old world. In the new world, what I think is going to happen is the ergonomics around human supervision are going to become more and more well understood. And we're going to start to develop tooling that is appropriate for human in the loop ergonomics. So in my own workflow, I have developed my own sort of ergonomic set, which has helped me a lot with my efficiency. And I'm going to show you what that looks like here. So on the left-hand side, I have Claude fired up. In my right-hand Tmux pane is Vim, NeoVim. Now, I'll talk a little bit about the specific reasoning for that. So on the left is my dialogue with Claude. That's where I give Claude context and instruction and feedback. On the right is my area for inspection. So imagine that you are working in a factory and your job was to inspect the deliverable before it goes out for the final mile delivery to customers. That is your job. As a human in the loop supervisor, you're really there to inspect model output and make sure that it's up to snuff before the final mile of delivery to customers. So I don't need a workstation that is optimized for coding. I need a workstation that is optimized for inspection. Now, in the software engineering world, that's actually rather common. If you've ever been a lead engineer, senior engineer, staff engineer, a lot of your work is reviewing other people's pull requests. And as you well know, the ergonomics around pull request review are very different than the ergonomics around keyboard work. They're different mindset, different time domain, different approach to the work. And yes, the reading experience is very different. So if you're not banging out code, you don't need a fancy IDE. You don't really need that editor experience. What you need are really great tools and ergonomics around inspection. So what I like to do is I like to piggyback on top of the Git staging area. The Git staging area represents the artifacts that are going to go to trunk. And if you're doing trunk-based development, you know that when you merge your branch to trunk, you're going to prod. So acknowledging that not everyone uses trunk-based development, but many do. If you're using trunk-based development, you have to understand that the artifacts that are in your Git staging area are going to go to prod. That is part of the bargain of trunk-based development. So understanding what's in your Git staging area is imperative. Now, using most IDEs, you can see your Git staging area, but the experience isn't optimized for inspection. Once again, it's optimized for production, but I don't want to produce, I want to inspect. So I want visually my Git staging area to take a big part of the screen real estate, because there's so much important information in the staging area for an inspector. So a real quick demonstration of how this works, I'm going to have Claude crank out, let's say, a unit test, and then we'll see how that shows up in the Git staging area. So I'm just going to say to Claude here, and we'll just let that cook. Now, while this is happening, I'll point out another, well, actually, I'm just going to go ahead and accept this. Okay, so right now, Claude just produced code. Claude produced a net new artifact called cart item test TSX. I saw the code in the chat dialog, but and it looked fine. You know, I probably wouldn't put any more inspection into it than that. But let's assume that this is important production code, and I really want to go all in on this inspection task. The way that a lead engineer, a competent lead engineer, is going to do this is that they're actually going to diff the code using some Git tool. So I'm actually going to pull that up. Now, once again, getting to ergonomics, using tmux, I can make this pane take over the entire window, which is actually what I want. And the reason that that's important is because I want to be able to do this side-by-side diff. This is the gift. This is a really important tool for anyone who has ever been a lead engineer, staff engineer. You have to review other people's code, or in this case, now we're reviewing LLM output. So the side-by-side diff is very important. Now, there's nothing particularly remarkable about this, so I'm going to go ahead and close this view. But I want to talk about this other thing that we're looking at down here. Now, recall that I'm not the one producing this code. I'm the one who's inspecting it before it hits production. So that would be a lot easier if I actually understood, what do I have in production? What work has already happened on this particular code line? Because presumably I'm working with lots of other people, and maybe even in other countries, and lots of activity has happened against this code line that I'm not aware of. So how can I responsibly inspect this deliverable if I don't even know what else has happened on this line of code since the last time I looked? Well, the answer is in the Git log. And the Git log, especially if you're a lead or anyone responsible for delivery, being able to read the Git log is really, really important, because it helps you understand what is at risk. If I productionize this code that I'm looking at right now, what is at risk in production? What's in production that this pull request could potentially bash or conflict with or cause some problem with? So those two things together, using the Git stage and using the Git log. The Git stage tells you what's in flight. The Git log tells you what's in place. Being able to quickly process all of the information that is available in those two sort of, portholes, that is the job. Being able to do that effectively is how leads mitigate risk in software delivery. One of the ways. It's probably the key way, especially now that we have this idea of moving quality to the left. What that really means is engineers are responsible for quality, and you're responsible for it at the stage of inspection when you're doing a pull request review. So, as they say, nothing new under the sun. The thing that is new is, rather than now being responsible for reviewing human output, we're now responsible for reviewing LLM output. And they're producing it, so much of it so quickly that we have to be able to do this quickly. Being great at this is a really important skill for the future. That's it for today. Explain like I'm 5.